Almost 60,000 people have now signed a petition calling for Sir Bob Jones to have the Sir removed. The signature follows a column in the NBR in which Sir Bob suggested, and I quote, a Maori gratitude day in place of a much disdained Waitangi Day. It went on, and I quote, I have in mind a public holiday where Maoris bring us breakfast in bed or weed our gardens, wash and polish our cars and so on out of gratitude for existing. The NBR removed the column from its website. Its author himself said it was, and again I quote, a piss take. Others said everything from freedom of speech to ignore him to he's right to who cares what Bob Jones thinks. But Renae Maihi, a filmmaker, was so offended she started a petition calling for Sir Bob's knighthood to be removed. Over 58,000 signatures later, I asked her why.
We've had enough of, racism in New Zealand. We've had enough of, negative messaging that influences our children, our people to think negatively about groups of people. And we ultimately want New Zealand to be great and to do well, and we recognise that when you trample on a group or a certain people's mana and esteem, that it's very, very difficult for those people to feel hopeful about anything. So I think that's probably why, and when you're in a position of power and influence, I think in a position where you've been granted an honour, I think you do have a responsibility to be mindful of what you're saying and the impact that has on the community you live within.
Do you want his knighthood removed, or were you just making a point?
As I said before, I really do think that when you're in a position of honour, that you have great influence, and I think that many great New Zealanders are in that category, of being a knight. Dame Whenekupa, Sir Apiranga Ngata, Sir Edmund Hillary, who are people who I think really upheld the mana of that title. And when I look at that collection of people, even Sir John Kerwin and all of his work around, depression, and I look at the people that they are and the integrity that they carried throughout their lives, I don't believe that, I believe that should be upheld.
Was this the straw that broke the camel's back for you, this column? Because if I look back at the sorts of things that well-to-do establishment white men have said about Maori during my adult life, there are so many examples of truly appalling, damaging, incendiary things. Why was it this one that made you think, nah, stuff it, I'm starting a petition?
Yeah, when I read it, my heart dropped, and my work as a filmmaker, as a person, actually is about the restoration of mana to Indigenous people. And you just get to a point, I think, when I read it, that I just went, we've this 250 years since James Cook got here, and we're still actually having to defend our mana in a country that we are the recognised First Peoples of, as per the signing of the treaty. And we just need to sort this out because it needs to stop, and so I do believe that, messaging is powerful, and it is that we have to be very responsible with what we're putting out there in the media, and because our children are hearing it, as well, and they subconsciously pick up these messages, our people pick up these messages. And we don't want a country of hopeless people, because that's a dangerous country to live in. We want people feeling really good about themselves. And I want to say that if, that column was targeted at any other racial group, any other, people, LGBT, people who are disabled or what have you in any way, that I would stand beside it as well. Because, with my son, I have raised him. This is not so PC, but I've said to him, you're not allowed to like a person because they're, white, black, brown, rich, poor, able, disabled, sane, insane, educated, uneducated, and, gay, straight, or they have differing spiritual beliefs. The only reason you're not allowed to like a person is if they're a dick. You know, like, so if they've got values that conflict with you, and I think that's the society that I want to live in, that when I walk into a room, you know, that assumptions aren't just made about me, which have been in the media. You know.
Can I pick up on that message to your son? And we have a rule at home too, and that is don't be a dick.
Yeah.
But how do you prescribe that? And if somebody is being a dick, don't you just say they're a dick and leave them to it, or respond and try and address their dickishness? Do we say, no, actually, you're not allowed to be a dick and we're going to silence your voice? In other words, how do we get that right in terms of freedom of speech, in terms of our right to be a dick if we want to be one?
Yes, that's true. And that's a really good point, because, you know, people are, and I do believe in freedom of speech. But I also think that there are lines and boundaries where it becomes something that is motivated by hate, and that, you know, I think it was Ursula Chair had mentioned that the definition, or what they see the definition of hate speech, or, you know, hateful action is that it, you know, I think it incites hostility or promotes contempt for a group. And so, you know, I feel, you know, in my opinion, that's what that column did. So how do we deal with it? I think it's with respect and dignity. But, you know, for me, I think respect and dignity is reciprocal. So if you don't treat people with respect and dignity, then it's very hard for that person to return that respect and dignity, you know.
Have you received papers from Sir Bob Jones's lawyers?
No, I've received nothing. And yeah, so there's nothing to report there. Yes.
Renae Maihi, Sir Bob Jones declined to be interviewed but told us he planned to serve those legal papers on Renae.